Very suddenly, there came back to my soul motion and sound, the tumultuous motion of the heart, and into my ears the sound of its beating. A tingling sensation pervading my frame. And then, a rushing revival of soul, and a successful effort to move. Now, full memory of the trial, of the judges, of the sable draperies, of the sentence, of the sickness, of the swoon. And then, entire forgetfulness of all that followed. So far, I had not opened my eyes. I felt that I lay upon my back, unbound. I reached out my hand, and it fell heavily upon something damp and hard. There I suffered it to remain for many minutes, while I strove to imagine where and what I could be. I longed, yet dared not employ my vision. I dreaded the first glance at objects around me. It was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but that I grew aghast, lest there should be nothing to see. At length, and with a wild desperation at heart, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thoughts then were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to stifle and oppress me.
The atmosphere was intolerably close. Quietly, I made effort to exercise my reason. I brought to mind the inquisitorial proceedings, and attempted from that point to deduce my real condition. The sentence had passed, and it appeared that a very long interval of time had since elapsed. Yet, not for a moment did I suppose myself actually dead. Such a supposition, notwithstanding what we read in fiction, is altogether inconsistent with real existence. But where, and in what state was I? Had I been remanded to my dungeon to await the next sacrifice, which would not take place for many months, this, I at once saw, could not be. Victims were in immediate demand. Moreover, my dungeon, as well as all the cells in Toledo, had stone floors, and light was not altogether excluded. I once more relapsed into insensibility. Upon recovering, I at once started to my feet, trembling convulsively in every fibre. I thrust my arms wildly above and around me in all directions. I felt nothing, yet dreaded to move a step, lest I should be impeded by the walls of a tomb. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable, and I cautiously moved forward, my arms extended, my eyes straining from their sockets in the hope of catching some faint ray of light. But still, all was blackness and vacancy. My outstretched hands at length encountered some solid obstruction. It was a wall, seemingly of stone masonry. It was very smooth, slimy, cold. I followed it up, stepping with all the careful caution with which certain antique narratives had inspired me. This process, however, afforded me no means of ascertaining the dimensions of my dungeon, since I might make its circuit and return to the point whence I set out, without being aware of the fact, so perfectly uniform seemed the wall. I therefore sought the knife which had been in my pocket, but it had gone. My clothes had been exchanged for a wrapper of coarse serge. I had thought of forcing the blade into some minute crevice of the masonry, so as to identify my point of departure. I tore a part of the hem from the robe and placed the fragment at full length and at right angles to the wall. In groping my way around the prison, I could not fail to encounter this rag upon completing the circuit. The ground was moist and slippery. As I staggered onward for some time, I stumbled and fell! And sleep soon overtook me as I lay. Upon awakening and stretching forth an arm, I found beside me a loaf and pitcher of water. I was far too exhausted to reflect upon this circumstance, but ate and drank with avidity. Shortly afterward, I resumed my tour around the prison, and after much toil came at last upon the fragment of the serge. There were in all, then, 100 paces, and, admitting 2 paces to the yard, I presumed the dungeon to be 50 yards in circuit. I had met, however, with many angles in the walls, and thus could form no guess at the shape of the vault. For vault, I could not help supposing it to be. Quitting the wall, I resolved to cross the enclosure. At first, I proceeded with extreme caution, for the floor, although seemingly of solid material, was treacherous with slime. At length, however, I took courage and did not hesitate to step more firmly, endeavoring to cross in as straight a line as possible. I had proceeded 10 or 12 paces in this manner when the remnant of the torn hem of my robe became entangled between my legs, and I fell violently on my face.
In the confusion attending my fall, I did not immediately apprehend a somewhat startling circumstance. My chin rested upon the floor of the prison, but my lips and the upper portion of my head, although seemingly at a less elevation than the chin, touched nothing. At the same time, my forehead seemed bathed in a clammy vapor, and the peculiar smell of decaying fungus arose to my nostrils. I put forward my arm and shuddered to find that I had fallen at the very brink of a circular pit, whose extent, of course, I had no means of ascertaining at the moment. In groping about the masonry, just below the margin, I succeeded in dislodging a small fragment. And let it fall into the abyss. For many seconds, I hearkened to its reverberation as it dashed against the side of the chasm.
At the same moment, there came a sound resembling the quick opening and as rapid closing of a door, while a faint gleam of light flashed suddenly through the gloom, and as suddenly faded away.